Welcome to Inspire, the Angel Flores podcast, where you'll be inspired, equipped, and entertained.
Jon, thank you for coming on, and thanks for sitting down and making time to do this. We've had these kind of conversations over the years, usually at breakfast, and so I wanted to kind of bring that in and share that with everybody. So let's start out with your story, where you're from, where you grew up, where you were born, family, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I was born in Potsdam, New York, in what they call upstate New York, just across the border from Montreal, really far north, and was there for the first 7 or 8 years of life, and so through second grade, and then in my third grade year, my dad was doing a sabbatical and had a year with the National Science Foundation. So we were in Washington, D.C. for a year. We lived in Bethesda, Maryland. And then when we were about to go back to Potsdam.
Your dad was
He was a professor of chemical engineering. Wow. And so he'd been working at Clarkson University in Potsdam. My mom was teaching kindergarten at the time. And we moved to Bethesda for a year. And then at the time we were going to move back to Potsdam, my parents had been looking at getting somewhere out in the Rocky Mountains. And my dad got a job offer at the University of Wyoming. And so we ended up in Laramie, Wyoming, from my fourth grade year up through high school. And so this was I was raised by my mom and dad, and then I have a brother who's 2 years older than me. And so we were in Laramie I was there up through high school until I moved away for college, and that was kind of the first big transition in my life. So,
what kind of student were you in school?
Yeah, I was a good student. I'm blessed and cursed with, kind of a tendency to be a perfectionist. And so that carried through into school, and I worked hard and I think school to some degree came easy to me, and I worked hard. So I did very well. And I had straight A's through high school. And
you were that guy. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, this, granted, this is before. So straight A's then was a 4.0. Now it's like a 4.72 or something like that, right?
Yeah,
there was
crazy.
There were no AP classes in Laramie at the time. Of course there are now, but none of those.
So Laramie High School,
Laramie High, yeah,
home of the fighting,
the high school, the Plainsmen and now the Lady Plainsmen. So
the fighting
Plains people,
Plains folks. All right, so then you went to where'd you go to school?
So then, for college, I went to the University of Virginia, and not really for a strong reason. Like, it wasn't the place or the place I dreamed of going, but just looked at schools. I wanted to go out of state. I actually really love Laramie now, but at that time, when you're growing up there, you kind of want to get out. And
right.
So I wanted to go out of state and then find something that was relatively affordable. And then I decided I wanted to study engineering. And so that rules out some schools that don't have a school of engineering. And so I ended up through that process looking at a few different colleges, but ending up at Virginia. And that was the first big transition because I was hopping on a plane. I just said goodbye to my parents in the airport in Denver, hopped on a plane, had my hockey bag just full of clothes that was checked, and a little backpack or something, and went off to Charlottesville, Virginia. And I mean, I didn't know anybody, not a cousins, friends, sisters, dog's owner. I mean, not a single person. No car, no relationships. Just took a cab from the airport in Charlottesville to the dorms.
So people that are listening, especially younger people, there was no internet back then.
Yeah,
there was no YouTube videos.
Yeah, ended up looking. I do remember I looked at a book at the time called The Public Ivies. And the idea was that, these schools that had some degree of prestige, but that were, more in a semi-affordable
state
price
schools,
range. Yeah. So I think that turned me onto it a little bit. And at the time I was an athlete, and I thought I played hockey and soccer, and the University of Virginia at that time had a really top-notch soccer program. So I thought, maybe I'd go there and play soccer.
Maybe walk on.
When I first, looked at it, and then, I as I aged, I realized I was, probably wasn't qualified to tie those guys' shoes. Like four of them were playing on the national team at the time, and or however many, right? And I could tell that they were at a different level than me, and so So I didn't follow through with that, but ended up going to the school. And
The jump
yeah,
from high school to college sports is not small.
yeah,
Everyone there
yeah,
was all
yeah.
conference, probably all state, best in their school, best in their state.
Yeah.
They're all now on this team. Yeah.
High school to college, anything. I mean, I remember, I was blessed with, a lot of gifts as an athlete, and was able to do quite well in the area I grew up in at all times. And I was aware that I wasn't, going to be a professional or anything, but I thought, I'm pretty athletic. And then I go out and play like intramural something at the University of Virginia, like say intramural soccer, where I, grew up playing, and holy cow, these, the players in this intramural game are better than anybody I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
And they're just in intramurals,
Yeah. They didn't
and they're good looking, and they're smart.
They're ripped.
So it was my introduction to, and everybody goes through, some type of experience like that, where I was certainly, I don't think I was a big fish in a small pond in Laramie or anything like that. But, you have your friends, and you have your comfort, and you know where you can be successful. And then I go to Virginia and I walk into a dorm with, not knowing anybody. It was a really good experience, and also an interesting challenge, because I'm not a person, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. At that age, I don't think I really knew who I was.
Right.
So
most don't.
You go through this thing of trying on different identities, and who am I really, and everything from I had a moment where well, my given name's Jonathan. Maybe I should have people call me Jonathan. It was just too weird, and so I went back to John, because that's
it felt familiar.
Yeah. So just it was a good experience, but humbling in a lot of ways.
So did you finish there?
So I finished there. Yep. I went all 4 years there, and degree in chemical engineering.
All right.
And so from there, I applied for jobs and things, and ended up getting the best and soonest offer I got was to go work at a paper mill in Texarkana, Texas. And
wow.
So yeah.
But so it brings up an interesting thought, though. A lot of bakers' sons become bakers.
Right.
A lot of ministers, their kids become ministers, or teachers, their kids. And I wonder if maybe it's a bit of modeling. You've seen it. I could see myself doing it. I know what that life is like. I know what that world is like, because I've grown up around it. Maybe it's a little bit of aptitude and genetic. I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I mean, there's a lot to peel back there, but I think one part of it is that thing they call the paradox of choice, is the idea that when you have an infinite number of choices, like about dreams or jobs,
first day of college,
it's not actually helpful if you don't have high experience in, like a lot of choices is not helpful when you don't have experience in that domain.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 15, you don't have experience in lots of careers, or really knowledge of lots of careers, other than just reading it on a paper. You really don't have that experience. So it's that idea of you have every choice at your disposal, but you really don't know enough to make a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's probably something to that. And so, there are more choices available than what your parents do or your uncles or aunts do. But those are, I think when you really look at what your choices are, I would bet people are prone to kind of look at those as the choices.
Yeah.
Because they know more about them. They know
is
how
my
that looks
worldview.
and how that feels.
Yes.
And I don't know. I'm sure there's much more to it than that. But,
Mm-hmm.
But for having talked to young people about dreams so much, it's sometimes, they're talking to an 8-year-old about their dreams. I mean, it's hard, because, when I was 8, I wanted to be a pro hockey player because I loved hockey,
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Watched it on TV.
I was choosing out of one possible career, right? Like, I love hockey. What's the career? Pro hockey, right? It wasn't like I was looking at 1,000 choices and saying I want hockey.
Mm.
I was just thinking of the thing that was on.
You
my
didn't
mind,
even know 1,000 choices existed.
Yeah, I didn't really, and if I was aware, I didn't know enough about them to make those choices viable. I don't know,
but that brings up an interesting thought about how our lives really evolve.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
choices we make, right? Like it
Mhm.
feels there, in a sense, there's an infinite number of choices available to a high school senior, college freshman, whatever. But really, yeah, you bring up
What are the real choices? Yeah. And when I think about, well, I'm sure we'll get into talking about God's plan for our lives, right? And God's plan for my life. And it was that idea of I didn't know at that age, for whatever reason, what God's plan for me was. Right. And so I was fishing in the dark. And
that's a good way to put it, fishing in the dark. Yeah.
And
I don't even know what kind of fish are in this. Am I in the ocean? Am I in a pond, river? I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm sure some people know, have an awareness of God's plan for them when they're 14,
right?
Or 8 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
My first inkling was when I was 23, 22, when I was working that first job, was when it struck me that this is not the plan.
Nothing will bring things into focus like a horrible job.
And honestly,
so what was the job?
So the job, I was a process engineer at a paper mill in Texarkana, Texas.
Had you ever been to Texas? Had you ever been to Texarkana, Texas?
I had probably passed through different places in Texas, but had very little experience with the South. And I don't think I'd ever been to Texarkana.
Aren't we
Although
all
it's
America?
A place everybody says they drive through it. It's on an intersection of interstates. So when people hear that name, they say, "Oh, I've been through there." I say, I stopped for a couple of years. So I was in Texarkana, and it didn't take long for me to realize, there's good people in Texarkana. It's not a bad place or anything, but it did not take me long to realize that, it wasn't my forever home, but also more so that engineering wasn't for me. But it was interesting. I often tell people that, if they don't know what they want to do, I think that's, pretty natural,
right,
for most. But I always encourage them to do something, because by doing something, you end up really, I think, finding it easier to be directed towards what you really are designed to do. And so it was interesting because the job itself, like the day I showed up for my first day, they forgot I was coming. I shared an office. I didn't even have a desk. The first day I had a folding table that was in my boss's office. They were so caught up in making money. Every day there was a meeting about how much have we made, how much have we lost, what were profits and losses. This is
so you're a few months out of college.
Yeah, a few months out of college,
Virginia, home of the fighting.
Virginia was Cavaliers. Yep.
So you're a Cavalier.
Yep.
Looking around saying, I've got wood paneling and I've got a folding table.
Yeah, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and, started my life in Texarkana and walked into that job and just, you have these dreams of your first job and then you walk in and they forgot you're coming and, you're at a folding table and you're thinking, geez, 4 years of college for this. And honestly, like my direct boss was a good human being, but they were just so caught up in, this is 24/7, 365, right? This plant. Making in a good month, this plant would clear $10 million in profit. It's that kind of money we're talking about. And so it's easy to see how they fell into that, where it was just so much about what's happening with the profits and losses.
We made 10 million.
Yeah.
But we could have made 10,100,000.
Right. And it was interesting because pretty soon I realized, okay, it's not just that I don't want to be an engineer. I just don't have any interest in talking about money.
Mm.
And I was like, actually it's the private sector by and large. And I exaggerated a little in my head, all the private sector. That's not to say anybody who works in the private sector is driven by money.
Mm-hmm.
But it was to say that the profits and losses matter. Like if you're running a business, the profits and losses matter. And I was just like, man, I actually don't want to be involved in that.
That'd be the driving factor.
And it's not even evil. Like there, it manifested itself in some evil ways. People, operated in some ways that I think were not, were not the kinds of ways that I would want to operate, in the name of making money. And that doesn't mean.
Is this a confession? Did you break the law?
Oh, no, I didn't break the law. No law breaking. I don't know that they broke the law. It just
felt
just that
sleazy.
Drive. Yeah. And it really just, it wasn't fun as a workplace because we were working on a project, something you wanted to, that you were given, improve this thing, and you put your heart and soul into it. And then they'd be like, oh, priority shifted. This machine is down. We need you over here right now. Which made sense. But
right.
So I actually, though, it was a fantastic experience, to not only from a scientific side to see how paper is made and just all the different aspects of it. We had a full water treatment plant. We had a full electric generation plant. There we had a full lumber yard, pulp mill. So I worked in all of these different areas and just learned about all these processes. And it was fantastic.
What kind of paper were they? Was it newspaper?
It was milk carton.
Milk
At
cartons.
that particular plant, we made, various forms of milk carton. So kind of a thicker
Wow,
paper.
that's interesting.
So, we're talking just trucks just lined up all day long coming in with trees, just big logs. And, from that to the milk carton, all of that.
Milk cartons are going out the back door. Yeah.
Yeah. And the plant was probably 2 square miles. A huge facility. Super smelly, right? And kept my clothes in a different room at home from working. But so super
for a couple
grateful
years, you're like, okay, this is not.
Yeah. So
this is
about,
not my life
I think,
calling.
about 3 months in, I was like, this is not my thing. And then, either at the same time or soon after, I said, actually, it's not just this plant, it's engineering, and it's not just engineering. It's probably, most jobs in the private sector. And so, I think now, not coincidentally, but at that same time, my boss, because he was so busy, driving things. And again, my direct boss was a great human being. He was coaching his son's soccer team, and he was having trouble, making it to practices and things. So he asked me if I could help. And then that was when, it probably wasn't the first practice, but I started really enjoying that. And I thought, man, how could I get paid for this? How could this be my vocation? And so then that really struck me, is that, I could coach, and teach. And so it was really coaching that got me thinking about going into being an educator. And so, probably no more than about 8 or 9 months into that job, I started looking at programs to go back and get a teaching license, and ended up making that choice. And left, resigned from that company, and first applied and got into a program, and then resigned from the company. And
Where was the school?
It was Colorado State University. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. When I shifted into teaching, I sometimes tell people the money I made at the paper mill, it took me 12 years as a teacher to.
That's true?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was making over double at the paper mill than my first teaching job. So it took 12 years to make that same amount, and never had a single moment of regret. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I had bad days as a teacher or whatever,
Sure,
but I never was like, why am I not an engineer? Why didn't I,
And it's interesting because God designs engineers, right?
Yes.
And you thought that's what he had done with you. And as it turned out, that wasn't true. That's how you figured it out. Because there are people who would go into and today go into that same job, just, this is why I was born, to solve these paper problems. And we just got a new wax on this carton, and man, you know what I mean? I think this is my contribution to the world, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that get that same amount of gratification out of doing a job like that, or working in an oil company or whatever for-profit work, but that's it. But this is how you figured out that wasn't you.
For sure. And really, interesting, I never really felt like this is my purpose, to be an engineer. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So
wondering.
I picked something and did it. Yeah. And then through doing that and through doing other things, then I think I was able to realize, really, really realize my purpose, and just, and then from that point now going forward, as other transitions have happened, it was a totally different feeling, to be aligned with what I really felt was my purpose. Like I said, I come home from a bad day at the paper mill. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what job do I want to work? So I'm analyzing my life, after a bad day at the paper mill. And when I shifted to teaching, I wasn't, after a bad day of teaching, I wasn't saying, why am I a teacher? Or what am I going to do with my life?
Right. Yeah.
I was like, man, that was a bad day. And it's just it was interesting to live both of those, because to me, there was in my personal, I guess the way I felt about myself and the world and how I interacted with the world, it's just night and day. It's a very different thing. And
So then, was that around when you met Jessica?
Yeah. So let's see. We had started dating when I was still at Greeley Central High School. And she was in Longmont, Longmont, Colorado, just down the road. And she was teaching elementary, but coaching high school track and cross country. And so, we met during my last year or two at Greeley Central High School.
All right. How long did you guys date?
So we dated for, it was really only about 6 months. I was maybe 29. So kind of the same, like we were talking about with, the vocation where it's like, kind of when I was like, this is it. Teaching is like, I know, and
This
same
is my
thing. Like,
thing.
I think I had evolved enough in life where it's like, yeah, I know. And so, 6 months, oddly, felt like plenty of time,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like this is sudden or,
Right,
I
yeah.
really didn't feel like that at all. So yeah,
You guys are both at a place in life where you're ready and mature and ready to go to the next place, and you found your person, and so let's go.
Right. Yeah. And it really did, and it felt that way. Like this is the situation and, this is supposed to be what we do. She's my one.
Mm.
Yeah.
So talk about getting to the dream job of principal and administration.
Yeah. So, I'm not really designed to be an assistant principal, and I don't mean that in like an egotistical way or something.
Right.
I'm the, it's just not really like, so it works for a little while, but I wouldn't be a good assistant principal after 5 years or so. And so I was like, I felt the urge to become a principal. And so I started, just at the time I was kind of feeling that urge. I had a person who had worked at Montford Elementary had changed over to a different school in town, Bella Romero. And that their principal was leaving and had announced it in maybe January or February that they would finish the year. And then her name was Michelle. She was going to go to Guatemala with her family and serve abroad and be an educator there. And so this friend of mine this person I had worked with at Montford, who's a friend as well, he called me and said, hey, we should have some coffee. Like, what do you think about this job? And, and I had actually just noticed that it was going to be opening. Mm-hmm. And so things really started to come together where I thought, this is the job I want. And so.
How big was the school?
Yeah, it was, at that time, the school was kindergarten through fifth grade and probably had about 430 students-ish.
Okay.
Something
How many
like that.
staff?
And probably, all staff all together was maybe 40-ish,
Okay.
Including teachers and office staff, custodial staff, all of that, about 40-ish at that time. And yeah, and it was interesting looking back. Like I knew I wanted to be the principal at that school. In fact, funny story, like to make a longer story short, when they interviewed me, there were multiple openings. And the way the school district did it at that time is they said, well, when you apply, you're applying to be a principal, and then we'll kind of interview you for all those openings. So the district office interview I went to they said, we're interviewing you for this job and this job. It happened to be two principal jobs at elementaries. And I remember telling them, and it was, it was a little bit bold, but I just said, I was polite, but I said, I understand that, but I'm only interviewing for Bella Romero. That's the job I want. And if you don't select me, it's okay. Like I can live with it, but I'm not interviewing for this other job. And it was funny. They turned it into a little bit of a pissing contest. Like, well, we're interviewing for both of those. I said, okay, just to be clear, I'm not, and I mean, so anyway, we do the interview and I progressed to the next round. The next round was you were to go to the schools to interview with the staff. And so they set up, the first one that I was set up for was at Bella Romero. And I went and went into this staff room and interviewed with the staff and everything. I come out and the superintendent was there and she said, okay, that's great. And we have you set up to go to this other school on this day. I said, look, I just need to tell you again, I cannot go to that school. I'm not going to sit there with those people and answer those questions and tell them I want to be their principal. It is not the job I want. I didn't apply for it. When I applied for this job. And you didn't select, you applied to be an elementary principal, to be fair.
Right.
So we got
you had already told them.
So we got her, and I was polite, but I'm just like, look, I can't be disingenuous. And thankfully.
And so for people who are listening, it could sound like there's this dream school and then there's this junkie, right? But the truth is it's the exact opposite. Like Bella was the school that probably not everyone wanted to be a part of. Bella's in the east side of town, which is probably what percentage of free and reduced lunch?
Yeah, probably varied between, it was about 85, 90%.
Okay, so 90% free and reduced lunch. Yeah. Heavily Hispanic, first generation parents. So this was not the Cherry Creek type like school that so I just want people to understand where you're coming from, because it could sound like, well, I just want the Cherry.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Cush job.
And the other school was, had strengths and needs as well. Was a good school. In fact, had some challenges as well. It was interesting. Is one of those things where I knew what I wanted.
A challenge.
Yeah.
And so, I just want people to get that.
Yeah.
That you weren't looking for this cushy, easy job. And if I don't get this, I don't want it. You were looking for the hard job. And if I don't get it, I don't want it.
True. And it was the job I felt called for, truly, and at that time, I think, and I'm still working on my relationship with God, but it felt like that was the job I was supposed to, to take, everything from, I think that the principal I was working for at the time, Amy, I think she actually told me, hey, this job's going to come open. Actually, I think she was the first one to tell me. And then like the next day, this guy who was teaching there calls me and, wants to have coffee. And then on top of that, the school is named Bella Romero, which is named after a woman who had passed. Her husband, Ray Romero, was the grandfather to a student at the elementary that I was working at. And so I kind of met him a little. We weren't close at the time, but so, same thing. When that had come open, I told him, I said, hey, I was thinking about, going over there. So I think we had coffee, and I asked him about Bella and just about all of that. And so these things were happening where, and I went over and met with the principal who was the current leader, and just talked to her, and just everything felt like it was
right.
Yeah, it just felt right. And it felt like not just right, like this will be a good job, but right, like this is my purpose.
So you got the job, obviously.
So got the job.
How did they take the whole, I'm not going to that other school?
I don't, like I said, I think at first they were trying to I think they kept trying to clarify I'm the boss. And I'm like, look, I know you're the boss. Like, I'm not saying you have to give me this job.
Right. Yeah,
I'm really not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that I get to choose what job. And I think that's where, honestly, a little bit of is, the root of some of that is probably some white privilege, honestly, but of my own, right? And theirs, saying that, but honestly, I was talking about myself. But the other thing is that I was at a phase where
Hispanic people listening, this is how white people talk to each other behind the scenes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A little power struggle there. And so, but to be fair though, the reason I point that out is if I was a person of color doing that, how would that have gone? Like, would I, maybe it would have gone the same.
Maybe it would.
But I'm not pretending that it definitely would, maybe not.
Interesting
I don't
observation.
Know. Yeah. But I do think the part that I think would be similar is that, when I've felt in my life like something is in alignment with God's purpose, I just, I think that's kind of where some of that empowerment came from, is like, I knew this was the job I wanted. Like, I wasn't ambivalent, right? When it came to choosing the University of Virginia, I was ambivalent. Choosing chemical engineering, I was ambivalent.
As your purpose started to dial in and focus, becomes a little more, I'm fighting for this.
Yeah, this is what I want. I know what I want, and therefore I'm not ashamed to announce it, because I'm quite clear. I'm not applying for a job.
Yeah,
I'm trying to serve my purpose. And I think
there's some clarity.
They're
for
two
sure.
different things, and I say, and again, I said these things, and it like, look, I completely understand what you're doing. I see how you're looking for the best fit for multiple places, and I said, I just need you to know I'm not. I'm just trying to be. Honestly, I was just trying to be honest and fair.
Yeah.
Like, to go interview for a job that I wasn't going to serve in. Like, if they had offered me that, I would have turned it down. I wasn't looking for a principal job.
Not trying to waste your time.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the difference. I didn't want to be a principal. I wanted to be the principal of Bella Romero.
So you get the job, obviously.
Yep.
How long were you there?
So I served there 11 years at that at the school.
Talk a little bit about the culture that you created. Because I came and spoke at the school once or twice. I spent some time in the school, And it was very different than any other school I'd ever been in.
Oh, well, yeah, in schools, isn't it crazy how much schools, isn't it interesting how much schools are different than one another? You know, you think
the same district,
same
city.
district, same city. You know, it's just wild. You can instantly feel it. Well, you know, when I first got the job, it began with just talking to a ton of people and just trying to hear about what was, you know, what is and what was, and some themes were coming up. And
so how'd you do that? Listening sessions?
Yeah,
just one-on-one?
Really one-on-one listening sessions.
Okay. So you met with everybody?
Met with all kinds of people. I met with Ray Romero, who was Bella's husband, you know, and just asked him about Bella and about her life. And met with staff members one-on-one. Met with a woman named Peggy who worked at the Greeley City Museum to learn about. I thought, you know, maybe there was something about the place that the school was situated, like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing all this to try and think, what's our vision? Like, what are we going to be about? And because it was a pretty new school, it was only like 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it was like a 5-year-old human, you know, you don't really know what you're about yet. Right. So I was like, what's this place about? So, I sat in the Greeley Museum and looked at old, you know, maps of the area and talked to this woman who was a historian about the area. And then who else did I talk to? I mean, community people, talked to parents, a little bit of students, but these were elementary students you know, and it was a relatively new school. So it's not like you're talking to an 18-year-old who went to this elementary. So after talking to all of them, one of the big themes was family, and the importance of family. And so we ended up, you know, kind of making that a pillar. And then the other big theme
what
was—
percentage of the school was Hispanic?
About at that time might have been 85%. Right now it's around 80%. Yeah, and then, you know, culturally, you know, I think one of the assets of many families who would identify as Hispanic or Latinx is the commitment to family and the value of family. So we built off that, not to try and market ourselves.
I
but,
actually
you know.
had a white guy explain that to me. So him and his wife were adopting a African American kid, little boy, and so they had to go to all this cultural training. And he explained to me. He said, "I learned that the difference between his family and his growing up and his family dynamic and this kid's was that African American people 200 years ago came from tribes in Africa. It's a tribal kind of family dynamic that carried over into the U.S. and has still kind of carried over, though not as strong, right?" When he said that, this light went on in my head. You know, Hispanic people in Mexico still live in somewhat tribal communities where they'll add on to houses. They live, you know, families own a whole block, and they just kind of keep adding. And so it's this community of cousins, uncles, aunts, all raising each other's kids and kind of this tribal, right? And it still carries over here where it's uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever. I grew up with 70 first cousins. So I have 70 between the two sides of my family, first cousins, 72 or something like that. And so it never occurred to me until this white guy adopting an African-American kid explained it to this Mexican. Here's how your family works. And so when you're saying family, that absolutely resonates. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what, you know, I'm a white male, right? That would, you know, and so I think that's what came out when I was talking to people, you know, the people that the school served, you know, the people that worked at the school, this emphasis on family. So, you know, because although that could be a positive stereotype, you know, and probably is a positive stereotype, you know, it may or may not be true in every school that serves a large percentage, but it was definitely a theme there. And so we built off of that. And there were some things in place already, like the previous principal had started this thing they were calling Operation Graduation, where they were going to follow students as they went to middle school. It was in elementary at the time. Mm-hmm. We later expanded it to K through 8, but so they would visit the kids in middle school. So she had started that along with some other staff members or whoever had come up with it. And so again, that was that idea of family in the sense of like, it's not like, you know, we're just serving you through 5th grade and you're gone. If you're family, you wouldn't just say goodbye.
Right.
You know, like you're always connected. You know, you always care. And so, yeah, we built things around family and then just tried to have that kind of general vision. And there was more specificity to the vision, but that general idea of the vision was then going to inform how we went about things. So we did follow the kids all the way through high school. We attend to this day, we attend their high school graduations, and we're there, congratulating them. And then, but even things like, what are our events? Well, our events are, our back to school night was called family night. Who comes? Whoever wants to from your family. It's not like,
whoever you decide is your family.
Yeah. And then at the end of the year in May, we always have a family reunion as the name of the event. And in that event, it's specifically advertised and promoted as for not just current students and families, but any student or family who's ever attended the school. And anybody that they consider, family.
Their family, yeah.
So I mean, it's this huge event where people can continue to come.
What do you
and things.
What
like,
is it?
Oh, that the family reunion is essentially, it's just a large gathering. I mean, jump castles, music, food, and then we also made it not because, a number of the families we serve were living in poverty, but not just because of that, to make it more inclusive and just remove a barrier. We just said it's all free. We said that's one of the philosophies of this event is we'll never ask anybody to pay anything. There's not like, you can go do this for $5 or you can go, So there's
bounce house is $3.
Yeah. So there's little games and activities. But really, honestly, the interesting thing that there's just enough activities to kind of give some little kids something to do, but mostly people just hang out.
Just mingling.
And it's crazy how many, high schoolers, come back, and to some degree now, some college students will even come. Most of them have moved on in life, and they're too busy to come to some K-8 event. But it truly became a community event, and even things like just one of our campuses. We ended up having 2 campuses, and at one of the campuses, when you walked into the office, there was this kind of like desk thing. It was pretty elevated. Like that's the first thing you see, and so we knocked that out and made the office so that when you come in, you can come all the way in, and then
gotcha,
the people's desks are around the outside. So that idea of like, you wouldn't say to family, hey, come here, but stop right here.
Yeah. Talk to me through this glass or whatever.
So just all those types of, and in today's landscape around people's thoughts with safety and security, some of those things are a bigger challenge, but we taught with our doors open. You say, so like when your kid's walking down the hall to go to the bathroom, they can see in the room, across the way. That idea of just all, people can say, lots of schools say we're about family, but like what we tried to be passionate about was like, let's show that in all these ways, in how the doors are open, in the way the office looks, in the way we name and advertise and or not advertise, then the way we run our events, all those.
Talk a little bit about I remember when I went there, the kids don't say, I'm a 3rd grader, I'm a 2nd grader. What do they say? Yeah,
so they say their high school graduation year. And
as a 1st grader, they learn their high school graduation year.
So like I wonder what this year's kindergartners are, since I'm not there right now, so I haven't, but we would always get a good chuckle out of like, when it was 2032 and like right now it's probably 2035 or something, right? And I thought, oh my goodness. But and it's interesting to watch the evolution, because when the incoming kindergartners learn that they're whatever they are, 2035, we have this chant they'll do 2035, 2035, and then all the adults say, yes, you will. And sometimes the other kids say that as well. And so, when a 5-year-old's saying 2035, they don't even know what it is.
It just seems like a million miles away. I don't know what you're talking about.
Because you could pull them. They could have just done the chant, and you pull the 5-year-old aside and say, hey, that chant you did, what does that mean? They're like, I don't know.
Yeah. Just doing what my teacher said.
Or really the better way, I ask them to truly tell if they understand. I'll say, by the way, what year do you graduate high school? And the 5-year-old will be like, I don't know. You just chanted
You were just screaming it, yeah.
But they don't make the connection, to then when
but at some point they do.
At some point they do. And again, that's something where many schools do that kind of thing. But we built our rituals and our routines around it to the degree that, it was a thing, and we corrected each other when we called them by their grade instead of their graduating year.
That's creating culture.
So a culture of
expectation of this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You are the class of 2032.
Yes.
And so in 2032, you're graduating high school.
Yes.
And instead of saying you might graduate or
Right.
you're for third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, whatever, that doesn't have nearly to me the same bite and significance as we're all working towards something. And I want you to know you're working towards it right now.
Yeah. Yep. And we called it a promise. We said that, we promise you that we'll be there, and we don't promise that, John or Ashley or whoever will be the one who's there. We promise that Bella will be there, because people change over time, but the school will be with you all the way through. And so we're asking you to promise that you're going to make it. And so
as much as a second grader can make a promise.
Right. Yeah.
But
and that,
still, your
promise has more gravity as they get older and, and, and there are kids who still don't, but I remember I was visiting a kid at one of the high schools in town. He was in 10th grade and he was doing a horrible job. I mean, his behavior was not in line with what it should have been. His grades were really poor. He was very credit shy, did not have enough credits. And so I met with him and pulled him aside and he was a pistol. It probably is a pistol. Great. I love the kid. And, but he at one point told me, I said, well, man, it might be time to start looking at like, if you're going to go to this other school that can help you get credits. He goes, no, I'm going to effing graduate from this school. He didn't, but, cause life is complicated. Right.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean I don't love him, but, it was that idea of he remembered, he wanted to fight for that promise. And he just wasn't for some reason at a place where he could really do it.
Right. Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like I was almost kind of like not giving up on him, but trying to kind of go like, okay, almost
it's okay.
Trying, like, yeah, it's okay. Say, no, it's not. Yeah, it's not, it's not okay. And it was also just funny to hear him say it because he was, dropping the
F-bomb in there.
Yeah.
That is funny.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So we could talk a lot about culture and what you did at the school, and there's a lot of incredible stuff. But really, what I want to fast forward to. I mean, you're in your dream job. This is living your purpose, right? We can talk a lot about that, right? You're doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I remember one day you sent me a text that said, "I'm quitting my job," and I was shocked. And I know it was not a shock to you. I mean, something that had been kind of. So talk a little bit about that process and how that came about.
Yeah. So,
because one thing we didn't talk about, and I didn't mention, people that will listen to this from all over the country. Bella Romero was, in my estimation, I probably will never say this. In my estimation, it was the flagship school, and it went from being this, this kind of little scrappy kind of out, at-risk kids in some degrees, to being a flagship school where kids wanted to go. So Jon was celebrated in the community somewhat because of what happened there. So now you're this guy who did the thing, right? That you check the box of achievement and whatever. And then so let me frame that better. So then I get this text from maybe the most successful or a successful principal in our community that says, "I'm quitting. I'm doing something different." That was a surprise to me. So talk about that. Yeah. Hopefully I framed that a little better.
No, I appreciate the framing. And I mean, the way the community, I think all I did was work with, the staff and the families to just, shine a light on all the positive attributes in the community that we were all, trying to serve and make better. And
took some skill to know which light.
So I think it was, it was a really, was and is a together thing. And there are still, like I always say, I don't believe in good schools, bad schools. Like there are good moments, bad moments, kids who are making good choices and bad choices. And so I could argue that the school that we were trying, together to build was, I could argue and give you statistics showing it's a bad school. And I could, show you that it's the best school in the nation. I mean, we'd have visitors coming from suburban Chicago to look at what we were doing one day, and the next day, 10 suspensions. I mean, it's, so it's,
that's how it goes.
There's no right. There's no, So not trying to, I'm right here as me trying to correct you, but just that idea of, I don't really view it that way, that like we really, I don't believe in turning a school around. I think at most you're just shining a light on what's already there that can be built upon. So, but but certainly we were able to really, I think together we were able to give the community, particularly the community we served, a lot of pride in what was going on and how their kids were being served, and give the kids pride to be able to wear the gear and feel good about it. And but yeah, so I think my original plan had been I wanted to work 13 years minimum. And I wasn't saying 13 and out, but just 13 minimum, because that's from kindergarten to high school. So I would see the kindergartners go all the way through the system as the principal of that school. And so, and then I knew that beyond, at some point, 13 years or 20, that I would probably have another phase of my career. So that was a little backdrop. So I thought there will be probably one more part of my journey.
More step.
Yeah. And I thought maybe in higher ed, working at a university, but I think it was a hard job, not like because of the kids or the family, but just, being a principal is a hard job, harder than anybody who hasn't done it would realize. The same way careers other people are working, like, people don't know how hard it is unless they've done it. And so it was hard. So there were many days I was like, man, can I make it another day? And so I
think leading anything, tends to, leading and opinions and, anyway.
Yeah. And we had grown. So we had 2 campuses and, 1,100 to 1,200 kids that we were serving, which is, was about 700 to 800 families that we served in the community. And so, yeah, it was a lot of stress and it was hard. And I loved it. It was my purpose. I wasn't like, I never during those 11 years thought I want to be a principal at another school or, this was, I knew if I ever left, I wouldn't be a principal anymore. Yeah. I wasn't going to go back to the paper mill. So, but it had been, I think, wearing on me more than I even realized. And so Jessica, my wife, I think she was the one who really helped me see. I didn't want to see, but she would sometimes say, like, when I was saying something like, man, I don't know how much longer I can go, which was really just, decompressing from the day, but also true. She would say things like, well, maybe it's time, or maybe it's close to time. And so that had been going on, not for the 11 years, but probably for, a year or 2 before I left, where she was seeing, because she was more able to see.
Person closest to you.
Yeah. What it was,
knows you the best.
Yeah. What that kind of stress and anxiety over trying to be a strong leader was doing to me. And so that was sort of the backdrop. I think she kind of saw it. That made me see it a little. And then, so we had been thinking and talking about that, but not making any kind of a plan,
right?
Like this is the last. It wasn't like this is the last year or anything like that. But it had been on my mind, and it probably been more and more on my mind as time went. But then I went to a funeral of a friend of mine from Laramie. His father had passed away, and I wasn't close with his father, and I hadn't seen this friend in years. He lives in California, and so somehow my mom and stepdad also knew him. And so they were going to go to the funeral. And so I thought, maybe I'll go. And so for some reason I went. And not that, it's good to go to a funeral, but it doesn't seem like one I'd go to,
Felt a little extended.
I'd be like, well, I'm a busy person, like that kind of stuff, right? So, but I went, and something, when I was there, I just really felt strongly, called to make a change. And it was a really nice service. And to set the context, it was at the University of Wyoming where the person had worked. And so it was more work related because it was, it wasn't the family service.
Right. Yeah.
So
more of a community service.
Yeah. But they talked a lot about, almost entirely about his work, which again was kind of appropriate for the context, but I hadn't been at the family service. So I'm just going.
All you're hearing,
all I'm hearing is about this guy's job and in how, and showing pictures of him, leading trips of students on, across the globe, on all these trips that he did for college students, which was fantastic, right? I'm not trying to criticize this person, but what struck me was I was like, man, this is gonna be my funeral. All these things about like work and, like
professional achievement.
Yeah. What I've done for kids at Bella, at the school. And, and I think over those 11 years, I still knew my priority was to be a good husband, to be a good father, be a good son and a good brother. That was always my priority in my head, but it was one of those things where at times that was my priority in my head, but my actions
did not necessarily line up with that.
Yeah. And so
that's a challenge for any. So on one hand, you're a leader, and you have leadership gifts, and you're called to lead. So yeah, I think that's just maybe part of the occupational hazard, man.
Oh, for sure, right? Yeah, and really, like, I still felt like I was a good husband, a good father, but I mean, I could see how my actions didn't always align with that, and
so this funeral kind of had that moment of like on a TV show when it zooms in real close, and
I just kind of thought, like, are people going to be saying I was a good principal, or a great principal, or great dad, or great husband? And I was like, man, I don't want there to be any doubt, and so, because I feel like, to be fair, I'm sure at times I was a better principal than husband, a better principal than father. I don't feel like all the time, but at times I think probably that was the case. And I thought, man, I need to, calibrate that. So I had been trying to, The
Bible says it's good for us to go to funerals because it makes us consider our own mortality. Yeah. And it makes us think about our own lives. So there is a lot of value, man, in having those moments. And
yeah, for sure.
And I wonder if that wouldn't have happened.
I don't know. I think it was the nudge, right? Because when I tell that story, sometimes Jessica would not be offended, but is like, there's a missing chapter there is that, we had been talking about it. Right. And so this wasn't the thing. Yeah. It was the nudge.
It was the straw that broke the camel's back.
It was like, I was like on that, I was ready to take that step, and it was just like a little push in the back. Like, cause I think because to some degree you feel like you're giving up,
I could see that.
And, and to a fault, sometimes I'm not a quitter, and so I was like, I don't want to give up, and, but then I was like, it's maybe not giving up, but just doing as my mom would call it, the next thing. And so, but yeah, cause I had experimented with, I was trying to give a little less of myself to the job. But after trying that and kind of failing at it, I realized that I just don't have that switch, or I don't have a dimmer on my, and it's partly a healthy thing is that it wasn't a job to me. It's just part of my life to be a principal. And so, but when it is part of your life, it's hard to then shrink that, somebody said like, well, what if 80%, after these years and what you've been able to do with people, what if 80% is okay? I said, I don't know. And even when the person said, I was like, man, I can't do that. But I thought, well, let me give that a shot. And I couldn't do it. And that person wasn't suggesting like a poor effort, just saying, you dial it back a little and you can go longer. And I just didn't know how to.
I don't know if I can do that. Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
But
that would be hard for me. It'd be hard for any leader, hard charger.
Yeah. So I came home from the funeral, talked to Jessica, and she was immediately supportive. Which was, made a huge difference.
How old were the girls when that?
So this was 3 years ago now, 2.5, 2.5-ish. So they were 12 and 14 or 11
so
and
getting
13.
ready to enter high school.
Yeah.
Pretty important time.
Yeah. And that was part of it too, is I thought, they're going to be out of the house before I know it. And I don't want to have a regret that, that I didn't give enough.
I'm doing it now, but they're in college. And,
yeah. And so... I talked to Jessica, and like after we talked, I think it was like 2 days after that, they let me sleep on it. But like 2 days after that, I notified my boss. Like the day after that, I notified the administration. The day after that, I, notified the staff. And then like 2 days after that, I notified the families. And I mean, within a week, I had communicated it to everybody.
Wow. How'd that feel?
And then 3 weeks later, COVID came.
Yeah.
And,
we learned a new word.
Yeah. God might've been protecting me from that, because I don't think I could have led during that after all the other work. But anyway, sorry, what did you ask?
How did that feel when you
had
that bittersweet?
Yeah, I'd say it was a real mix of emotions. But again, because it felt like my purpose was shifting, in multiple ways, and that I felt aligned with what I felt like that was, in that funeral was that extra nudge was God. Jessica had been telling me, I've been trying to tell myself, but then it was God saying, come on now. And so it felt, it was a mix of emotions. I didn't have any moment of regret. Like I never was like, oh, what am I doing here? Or is this right?
This is crazy.
But I felt sad, maybe a little relieved. Just, there's a little bit of a drop of the shoulders that comes. somewhat excited about the next thing, but yet it was ambiguous, right? Because I was resigning. I didn't have a job lined up.
Yes.
Like I
that's what I wanted to bring that up. I remember you telling me, and I was like, oh, okay. So what are you going to do? And you said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was so out of character for but so that's how I knew as your pastor. I was like, man, God is doing something big in Jon right now, because this is, I mean, at the end of the day, this is crazy. This is crazy, but you knew it was right.
Right.
And so when you know it's right, it doesn't feel this crazy, but in hindsight, maybe, and if you're looking at someone else's life, you might have been like,
right.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was, because people would ask that, well, what's next? I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, but
you had a plan.
I had a little bit of a plan.
Right,
Yeah.
It wasn't completely I might go.
Yeah. So to be fair, I'd been working on my doctorate. I had re-engaged, which was only going to be a couple-year process because of the work I'd done to get the principal license got me about halfway to a doctorate, 10, 15 years prior. So I knew I wanted to finish my doctorate, and then I did know, okay, I'm going to work at a university or work in higher ed. But it wasn't like a job was posted and I was applying or, and I still hadn't written the dissertation. So like I needed to.
Still had a good year of academic work before you could even.
Yeah, solid year of academic work. And that was part we said, well, then I'll resign, and that'll also allow me to then bang out the dissertation faster because doing that as a
How many pages is your dissertation?
Oh, I don't know. 160-ish probably or something. Yeah. I mean, it took a solid year between the
You're writing a book.
different steps of the process. Yeah. So I had
Did you get
a master
bound?
plan, but
Did
not
you get it bound?
specific. Yeah. I did. I got it bound. Yeah. I got one copy bound.
One copy.
Yeah. One copy.
All this work for one.
Yeah. But, so it was a leap. And I think, but
I don't know if you'll talk about this because I know how you are. But one of the things that struck me, so when this is happening, in real time, you and we meet once a month for breakfast, and we would, meet just to talk about that. Initially started out, we'd talk about leadership, and because you're not revealing all. I mean, you're a leadership expert, and so you helped me a lot in terms of creating culture in the church, and so our conversations, I think, probably helped each other. But as we're meeting about this, and I remember you telling me, I want to teach at UNC. Like, I feel like I'm going to teach at UNC. And there was no job opening at UNC. There was no hint that there would be an opening at UNC, but you were pretty certain that you were going to teach at UNC. And so some people would say, well, Jon was manifesting that, right? That's the secret, right? You speak to the universe and call things, right? The Bible does talk about that. You speak those things that are not as though they are. And so that's kind of what you were doing. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think, even when first people would say, what's your plan? I'd say, well, I'm going to finish the doctorate, and then I want to be in the educational leadership department at UNC. So I would say it then. And then it was interesting. So I said it then, and not like, this will happen, but I just said this, it's my plan. I said, it's not their plan yet.
They don't know it yet.
Yeah. But then there was a little phase.
I remember that verbiage. It's not their plan.
Yeah. And then there was a little phase there where I wouldn't necessarily call it like doubt, because I still thought, that's the plan. But I was like, well, I was doing the thing of like, well, I need to leverage, and let me look at what other chances. And then, and I picked up
just as a father and a provider.
Right? And the rubber hits the road, and so, and I'd picked up some contract work while I was doing the dissertation to just bring in a little money. I mean, Jessica was carrying the load for sure. But I was trying to earn just a little money to chip in. And so I thought, well, maybe I should look at one of these things being full-time. And then UNC still didn't have anything posted for that next year. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And so there was, maybe doubt, but more so like, I guess, reality, right? That idea of like, okay, what do I do sort of in the meantime? And it was interesting. So like early on, I felt like that's what's going to happen. Then there was a period where I was like, is this going to happen? And then on that one, I was up snowshoeing in Rocky Mountain National Park just by myself, and I just somehow, like, through my brain just just rolls when I'm, hiking or snowshoeing
When you're
or
doing
whatever,
something that doesn't require
yeah,
thought. Yeah.
just cruising along, and it was, I forget how it sounded in my head or whatever, but I was like, well, what am I doing? Like this, Jessica and I have always believed you work where you live where you work. I've wanted to work at UNC. That's what I want to do. This is our community. We're not moving. That was another factor. We're just like, we're going to stay. That. The kids are happy here. Her job was stable and good, and she was happy here. So I was like, we're not moving. So I was like, well, it's UNC. And so it was this interesting thing of like, well, it's obvious. Like I'm working at UNC. So I came down from that.
Said clarity.
And full clarity. And so I re-engaged with that. I told Jessica about it, and she was like super supportive and a little bit like, okay, and if, where's the, like that's in real life, honey, here in the real world.
But what if?
Yeah. Which honestly, she was more supportive than I could imagine anybody being. But because she truly was supportive. I'm like, okay, but in the meantime, And so, but I set up a meeting with, the department head in that department I wanted to be in, and kind of just, I think she kind of knew my intentions, but I had set up a meeting and said, look, I just want to tell you, like, I really want to work there. And, kind of like what I'd done with the Bella thing, where I was like, I'm not saying if there was a job, you'd even choose me. I just want to make my intentions clear and, X, Y, and Z. Set up a meeting with both of the other people in the department, set up a meeting with the HR director at the time, who happened to, he was a friend, so, but, or acquaintance at least, and great guy. But so just started just putting it out there, and then started telling people more. Just when people in those conversations, I wasn't anymore like, well, we'll see what happens, or I was like, I'm going to work at UNC, but I just got to wait for it. So it didn't come up for that ensuing year because I finished the dissertation, so I had another. Then I needed a full-time job, and so I ended up piecing things together for one more year. I worked at Metro State University in Denver, which was a fantastic experience, but that was part-time. So I just went a couple days a week and then did 3 or 4 other little small contracts to kind of piece it together. And then during that year, about mid-year, a job posted, and and they had told me it was going to post, and so I knew that, and so I applied and went through the process and was blessed to be selected. So, so there was the gap year doing the dissertation and just small part-time work that didn't amount to much, and then the year of half-time at Metro State and some other contracts to try and buffer that, and then. Now we're this year. This is right now. I just had orientation the last 2 days for.
So this is it, Professor Cooney.
This is it. Yeah.
So to the person who's watching or listening, who is frustrated because God's not doing it fast enough.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah. Welcome to the club, right? I would say that to me, the tough part is knowing, is it God's purpose? Right? Because I think I was fortunate that, rewind all the way back to University of Virginia. I don't know that was God's purpose. In fact, I kind of feel like I might have swung and missed. Like, it's fine. Like, I graduated with a degree. It was great, but it didn't feel like it really aligned with God's purpose for my life, just the way that all played out. But when I left the engineering job, no doubt. When I, decided to be a principal at Bella Romero, no doubt. When I decided I wanted to work at UNC, no doubt. And I think that's what carried me through the inevitable. Because, I don't want to leave out the part of the story where I'm like, for real, is this really going to work out? Like, and when I actually started searching for other jobs, going like, well, maybe I just better,
just in
hedge
case.
my bets, just in case, I mean, there are all those things.
But that's encouraging to someone who's going through it right now.
Right.
Like, is this really going to happen? I think it is. I believe it is. We started Mosaic. There was 8 of us in our kitchen.
Yeah.
And for the first few years, of course, on the outside, I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be great. We're growing. It's gonna be awesome. And the inside, I'm like, is it? You know what I mean? Every honest leader has those moments of, is this really gonna happen?
Yeah.
Every
for sure,
honest
there was
follower
doubt.
of Christ has, is God really gonna?
Yeah. And I think that's where, the other thing, it depends on people's past experience. I've been fortunate enough to have, when I've felt that call, I felt like I've aligned to the purpose, it's all worked out. So So I can go like, yeah, see there and there and
Right.
there and there, you know. And so this time when I have that doubt, I look back on those and go like, it'll be okay. And I have some self-talk that's like, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's that first time that it's probably harder.
Scariest.
And then it's also probably harder, you know, I think the challenge for, you know, you talk about this a lot, is surrounding yourself with people who are going to speak life to that. You know, there are plenty of people who would say something like, you know, if it would have been, you know, like, well, you know, you might want to look somewhere else. I mean, are you sure? And very few people said that kind of thing to me. The majority of people, and the most important people, like my wife, my mom, my stepdad, my brother, you know, the kids, they didn't doubt that this
Right,
was going to happen. Well, I mean, they had the normal amount of doubt, right? But they believed in me, you know, and they didn't say like, well, I don't think you should really, you know, they believed in me, and they have before too. Like when I said I'm leaving my engineering job, my parents were like, sounds good. You know,
instead of, are you crazy?
Instead of like, what are you going to do? Are you really winning? You should think about this. They didn't do any of that. It's like, sounds good.
Cool.
So
part of the
I
goal
think,
as a parent is to build a kid that you can trust, and trust their decisions and trust their gut.
Yeah. So I think that those things got me through the, you know, like you're saying, let's not gloss over the fact that there's doubt, even when.
Yeah. It hasn't all been fairy tale.
Even when, you know, I feel aligned to the purpose. But yeah, that's what's interesting.
That's a great point, Jon. I don't want to miss that. When you're in the middle of God's plan, this was obviously God's plan, that you would leave Bella, finish your degree, and start teaching at UNC. So you're going to be a professor at UNC. And I think it's important to note, you're going to be teaching up and coming principals. So you're going to be teaching the young Jon Cooney, right? So this is God's plan, obviously. That does not mean it's easy. Does not mean it's not a fight. Just you can be right in the center of God's will, and it is a fight.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point earlier, it doesn't happen as fast as we want. I mean, gosh, honestly, I feel blessed that I think it happened faster than it could have, you know, but yeah, it wasn't instant, and, you know, and there was plenty of time for me to hijack the story, right? And say like, you know, nope, I think I'll do this, and, you know, instead.
What would you say? So Jon and I, we've talked a lot about first and second half of life, kind of, I don't know, the two halves of life. And I think I want to bring you back, and let's unpack that big, because I think that'll be a longer conversation. But what would you say to the guy who's feeling, I think I'm done with this part of my life, but it's been such a defining piece of who I am.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling that stirring, or that release, or that whatever. What would you say to that guy who's kind of,
Well, first, probably, you know, to find ways to hear God's voice in it, you know, and then I'd say also, like, it sounds like the same thing in reverse, but to filter out the noise. Like, to me, salary is noise, you know. And you know, that idea of like, well, this pays more, this pays less, and, you know, it's the same with tithing, right? You know, like if you didn't believe you'd be okay, you wouldn't tithe, you know. And so
tithing is when you give a percentage of your income to the work of the Lord, to the church.
So that idea of, you know, filtering out there's plenty of things that will convince us that we shouldn't, you know, make that leap or make that transition. And then also, I guess, in a different way, people, you know, when we have success in an area, I think that part of that stir is when we realize that really success wasn't about, like, for me as a school principal, it's like, if I thought success is I turned that school around, I mean, it's a naive statement. And I think we begin with that kind of mentality, like, well, here's what I can do. And really I think that stir comes from realizing that there actually was no game being played there. Like, I wasn't trying to turn around some school. Like, it's not a me thing anyway. There's a whole community there. And like I said, it's one moment it's a great school, and the next moment it's an awful school. It just depends on what your eyes catch or pay attention to.
You're focusing on,
And that idea that really we're not trying to, and now I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but we're, you know, I think that stir comes when we realize, like, man, what if I don't have to actually try to be the best? What if I don't need to think about how I win or how I'm respected? And what if I'm actually just like maybe now thinking about just how do I live my purpose and live it in a way that I can feel proud about? And what if I don't have to then compare, like, how did I do? Well, let's see how the other schools did, or let's see how the other companies did, or how much business do I have, or how many people are in the chairs at church. And I think that stir comes when we realize that that's a zero-sum game. Like checking how many people come on a Sunday in church, how many people, the win-loss record of the Broncos, like it's all a zero-sum game.
Right.
Like we'll play it.
Yeah.
But people in their second half of life, unfortunately, aren't leading. The NFL is a good example. People say things like it's all about winning. Oh, really? Oh, really? You're 50 or 60 years old, and you're the new owner of the Broncos, and the first thing you say is it's all about winning. And you know what? I bet that person probably doesn't really believe that. They said it for the people, but stop saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Stop saying that.
Yeah.
Because that's the charade. That's the charade, because you can never win enough, right?
Right.
The Broncos just won the Super Bowl in the big picture the other day. And was it enough? It wasn't enough. Come to find out, it wasn't enough.
So Johnny Adiola, his podcast actually coming out in a couple weeks. I asked him, when did you know you were successful? When did you know you had made it? The guy won 4 Grammys. And he said, we packed out Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. 115,000 people were in the place. He said the building was shaking. We couldn't hear ourselves, right? And I thought, we made it. And then, I don't know if he says this on the podcast. He goes, my next immediate thought was, what now? It's never enough. It's never enough. Whatever the hill we're trying to climb. I'm listening to a podcast with a kid named Mikey Mitsunichi. He's 25 years old. He does jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. First non-Brazilian to ever win multiple world championships. Kid he's a phenom in jiu-jitsu. I mean, he's such an outlier in so many ways. And he said he won his first world championship and he became depressed because I thought it would make me happy.
Yeah.
As it turned out, I got there. And so we're chasing ghosts, man. We're chasing this illusion of happiness that if I just get over this mountain, then we're going to.
Yeah. And I think, so when we talk about second half or, of life, or when we kind of start making that transition, I think the part that I'm still trying to work on is okay. So what we don't want to do is say, okay, so if it's not all about winning, being the very best, well, what we don't mean is sit on the couch all day.
Right. Don't mean give up and eat Doritos all day and just play video games.
Because there can be, to be honest, as I've let go of some of the, I don't care that much about, how many points we get on the school performance framework for the state of Colorado. Like, it doesn't mean I don't care about kids though. And I don't care about achievement, because it does mean something, but it's just that idea of, okay, so how do I continue to be super driven as a leader? Like when I was a school leader, how can I be super driven? Which clearly will result in most cases in more points on the school performance, but that have that not be the thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm still working on dialing into.
I think the idea we're dancing around is contentment.
Yeah.
Is I'm content. I'm going to give my all here, but my identity is not wrapped up in school performance, or for me, the attendance on Sunday, or
and yet you're still going to push it, right? More people in church is better, right? Let's do it.
Yeah.
So you still care, you still notice,
right? You
still pursue
it, tracking it, all that.
You're still tracking it, but you're not
tied to that.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that, to me, for me personally, this second part of life, if I'm even in it, right? I mean, who probably knows except somebody wiser than me. But if I'm in it, it's that I'm trying to spin that dial around. Okay, no, don't give up. Like, work hard, but don't chase that illusion of always trying to be the best. Like, is John the best? I think you can principal? Like,
identify us. If there is a first and second half of life, I think you can identify that guy by he did the thing, whatever the thing was, that he set out to do, and he found out he could do it. So then he feels contentment in the fact that I know I got, I did the school thing. I got the degree. I got the girl. I built the business. I built the church. Whatever the thing is that you want to do. I got the promotion. I got the job. Whatever. He's did the thing. Found out that wasn't the secret to happiness. And I think everyone needs to do the thing. I think every man needs to, or every person needs to do the thing so that you find out that's not it. Then what?
Yeah.
Is what's really important. And I think you identify the guy by the fact that he's done the thing and there's a humility about him now. Doesn't have to be the center of the room. Doesn't have to be the guy that's, chased after. Because you could have finished your career doing the thing and being the celebrated guy in the room. But
maybe. Although then that's temporary too sometimes, right?
It is.
If we're celebrating the wrong thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And when people...
It's an interesting idea for sure. We need to unpack that more.
So I don't have it figured out.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Someone smarter than us is listening to this saying, you know what you guys are missing?
Yeah.
Please email us.
For sure.
Two last questions. One, what does the word success mean to you? And are you successful?
Yeah.
What does that word even mean?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be successful. Right?
Yeah. I think it's probably shifted over the years, but I think in my current season, I'd say success to me, I mean, interestingly, it's something I don't think about much, really, very, very little. It doesn't mean I don't have goals and I'm not, trying to do well in my vocation and with my family.
You want to be a good professor at UNC.
But I don't think about much. But I guess success to me would be that I'm aligning my life with God's purpose for my life. And then but that alone wouldn't be enough because I could be, like right now, I feel like I'm aligned with God's purpose in terms of my vocation and, I'm a husband and father, but am I doing it well? And so I think success to me is being aligned to that purpose, but then, day to day, truly like day to day, living that purpose in a way that aligns with, values and integrity. And so I don't see success as like, I got it or I didn't on this or that. I see it as every day. And so, therefore, the challenge I face is that I more often, if I was thinking about success, would feel not successful because I can just see all the things I need to work on and things I need to improve. I still need to be a better husband, a better father. And I can see all those, I'm a perfectionist. So I see all those mistakes that I make. And so even if I could be like, oh, I was a great principal. And, who knows, right? But if I was saying that in my head, well, today, was I a good father? Was I a good husband? And so, those are the things I think about. And, ultimately, I hope that at my funeral, if you outlive me and you do my funeral,
not likely.
Success for me also would be being authentic to the journey in the sense of like, I should do it. My father wrote his own service to some degree, like the skeleton of it. And I'm adamant I want in my funeral service some talk about my weaknesses, because otherwise we just perpetuate this idea that,
right.
Like when I left the principalship, people were very kind, like, oh, you're this, you're that, somebody said you're the GOAT, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And remember that time where where I fired your friend or, that idea that, I have made and continue to make plenty of mistakes. So to me, honestly, success isn't what I probably want it to be, like perfection, but it's just committing to that journey of trying
it's the daily
pursuit. Yeah. I don't think of success as past tense kind of ever, if that means, like it's
that's a good way to look at it.
I'm like, today you mean? Like, well, I don't know, I didn't wake up as early as I should have. Yeah.
Last question. It's good. Where have you seen God in all of it?
Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening that might have figured this out already or haven't, John's wife Jessica was on the podcast a month or 6 weeks ago, something like that, and she shared how you guys came to faith with a young man who was killed in a car crash.
I mean, I feel like I see God the whole way, and when I was younger, I didn't I didn't see that, but now I see that God was there.
Hindsight,
too. That God was there to have to be blessed with the parents that I had, and now to have my father's past, but to have my stepdad in my life, to have those people guiding and supporting me, God, and my brother, and the support we have for one another. So God was there meeting Jessica. It's the part when she was on, told the story, she forgot the part of we had seen each other before, and we didn't even realize it when we met in Denver at the bar that we didn't add it up, but we had seen each other before because we were both coaching cross country. I can't run to save my life, but a friend of mine needed some help, big team, and so we'd kind of seen each other and we didn't even add it up. So it's that idea of like looking.
So you
back,
had noticed
like,
each other,
yeah,
for sure. Hey,
yeah.
who's
Looking
that?
back, it's like, oh, God was, that was a God thing.
He's playing this invisible game of chess,
right? And God was there to guide me into education and find my purpose there, which has been so fulfilling. Just since I made that shift, I've never had a moment of wondering, is this the career for me? Like, I mean, I wish everybody would have that blessing to never have a moment at a certain point where they, are wondering if they're in the right career. So, and then, for sure, as we've spoken quite a bit about, I think God was there in my transition into a principalship and being at the right school for me, it aligned with my journey, and then to transition into the professor role. God has been there, and I just think it's allowed me to have the comfort to make some decisions that if I guess didn't seem to make sense. Making $48,000 as a 22-year-old, and I'm going to go and dump every bit. Spend $15,000 to get a teaching license to get paid $22,000. Which it's not about. I mean, it's not about the money. 22 was enough to get by on.
When I went from private sector to being a pastor, I went from 42 to 15.
yeah, right.
You have that in common.
Yeah. And I mean, not to minute. I mean, money matters, right? I mean, if it had been for whatever it was, 40 something to 5, I mean, then maybe you need to do something, But so I mean, I don't want to minimize that. I was blessed enough to earn enough either way. But seen God the whole way, and interestingly, more often in reverse, right? I'm like, oh, that's what
hindsight. Yeah,
that's what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. It's so easy when you look. The farther back you look, it's easy to see his hands moving. That's why that happened. Oh, that's why that happened. That's why I went to even that bar, right? I met Diane at a hot tub party. That's why I went to that hot tub party, because God was working. And interestingly enough, we had seen each other a couple times before that too. So God was obviously working. But it's harder the closer you get to present. When you try and look at yesterday, where was God working? It's so hard to see that. Yeah. Because we're so in the middle of it, and we're so obviously emotionally involved and all that. So it's tough. Well, with that, thanks, Jon. Thanks for coming on. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We'll have to do it again and talk more about that second half of life stuff. Maybe after we figure it out a little more.
I got more questions than answers there. So
cool. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.